Welcome to Mythology Sin Fronteras, where we unravel the stories behind the legends. In the HBO classic Band of Brothers, the episode Crossroads presents one of the series' most defining moments. We see Captain Dick Winters, faced with a strategically impossible position on the low ground in Holland, make a bold decision. Instead of waiting to be annihilated, he chooses to lead a surprise frontal assault across 200 yards of open field against a superior German force entrenched on a dike. The on-screen charge is ignited by a supposed mistake, a delayed smoke grenade that forces Winters to sprint ahead alone, becoming the sole tip of the spear. Reaching the dike, he locks eyes with a young German sentry, just a teenager, kneeling about 25 feet away. In a moment of high tension, the German boy looks at Winters and offers a disarming, enigmatic smile. Shaking off a moment's hesitation, Winters raises his rifle and fires, an act that will haunt him for the rest of the story. This scene is framed as the psychological turning point for Winters. The image of the smiling soldier becomes a ghost, flashing back in his memory, while he's on leave in Paris and defining his internal struggle with the cost of command. The series tells us this is the moment the weight of war settled permanently on his shoulders, a clean, dramatic, and unforgettable piece of television. But like many legends, the on-screen myth is far from the whole story. The first part of the myth to deconstruct is the reason for Winters' solitary charge. In reality, there was no faulty smoke grenade. The signal to attack went off exactly as planned. The simple truth is that Dick Winters, fueled by an extraordinary surge of adrenaline, was just faster than everyone else. He was, in that moment, operating on a different plane of existence from his men. Winters himself described the experience as otherworldly. "I was running faster than I ever ran before in my life," he recalled, noting the bizarre perception that both his own men and the Germans seemed to be moving in slow motion. He felt as though he was moving at a normal speed, while the rest of the world was stuck in a waking dream. This wasn't arrogance. It was the physical manifestation of a mind and body pushed to their absolute limits under the threat of annihilation. This superhuman perception gave him a crucial advantage. While his men struggled with hidden barbed wire in the grass, Winters, despite tripping himself, reached the dike alone and with seconds to spare. It wasn't a technical failure that put him there, but the raw, focused power of a leader in what he knew was a do-or-die situation. The reality of his physical feat is, in many ways, more incredible than the cinematic excuse provided in the show. The second myth surrounds the physical distance of the confrontation. The series places the German sentry 25 feet away in a field, allowing for a dramatic, cinematic duel of gazes. The truth was far more terrifying and intimate. The German lookout wasn't in a field. He was directly on the other side of a narrow dirt road, a mere 2 steps away, according to Winters. This was an eyeball-to-eyeball encounter, so close that strategy was irrelevant, and only pure instinct remained. Furthermore, the show omits a crucial piece of tactical context. The reason the German soldiers were all hunkered down was because they were taking cover from suppressive machine gun fire laid down by Lieutenant Welsh's men. This was a coordinated assault, and the covering fire was essential to its success. The series' omission makes the Germans' posture seem strangely passive, but in reality, they were pinned down, which allowed Winters to gain the element of surprise. This proximity fundamentally changes the nature of the event. It wasn't a detached, almost sterile killing from a safe distance. It was the brutal, personal reality of war at its most raw. Winters was close enough to see the shock on the young man's face, to confront his humanity in a way that the on-screen version only hints at. The real story is infinitely more claustrophobic and shocking. The most significant piece of the story, completely absent from the Band of Brothers episode, is what happened in the seconds before Winters fired his rifle. This wasn't a simple encounter. It was a silent, deadly duel where fate, not skill, played the deciding role. Upon seeing the German sentry, Winters immediately pulled the pin on a hand grenade and tossed it over the road. Simultaneously, the German soldier reacted, lobbing a potato masher stick grenade back at him. In a moment of heart-stopping panic, Winters realized his own mistake. To prevent accidents, he kept a band of tape around the handles of his grenades. In the heat of the moment, He had thrown the grenade without removing the tape, rendering it useless. As he braced for the impact of the German grenade, preparing for his own fatal error, a miracle occurred. The enemy's grenade also failed to explode. For a breathtaking instant, two soldiers who had committed to a lethal exchange stood unharmed, saved only by a combination of a careless mistake and sheer dumb luck. This surreal, almost comical moment of failed lethality reveals the unpredictable chaos of combat, where life and death can hinge on a faulty fuse or a forgotten piece of tape. It was only after this failed grenade duel that the famous moment of the smile occurred. Winters immediately jumped back onto the dike. The German sentry was still hunched down, covering his head and waiting for a blast that never came. He looked up, and seeing Winters standing over him, he smiled. In the context of the real events, this smile is even more enigmatic. Was it relief that they had both survived the grenade exchange? Was it a grim acknowledgement that he had lost the game? Winters never knew. But standing there, he didn't have time to ponder its meaning. The German was just a few yards away, and the element of surprise was everything. "It wasn't necessary to take an aimed shot," Winters stated. "I simply shot from the hip." That single reflexive shot broke the silence, startled the entire German company, and officially ignited one of Easy Company's most ferocious battles. The smile, therefore, wasn't just a reaction to being spotted. It was the final, mysterious act in a bizarre, one-on-one confrontation that had already escalated and de-escalated in a matter of seconds. It was a human moment, suspended in an impossibly inhuman situation, and it would be burned into Winters' memory for the rest of his life. Another legend perpetuated by the series is the identity of the German force. After the battle, a soldier inspects a dead German's collar patch and exclaims, "Jesus, Captain, they're SS." This implies that Easy Company had just defeated two full companies of the Waffen-SS, Nazi Germany's most fanatical and elite troops. While this makes for a more dramatic victory, Winters himself felt it was important to set the record straight. The German unit was primarily the 369th Volksgrenadier Division. These were regular army soldiers, though they were a hardened unit that had been mauled in Normandy and refitted with replacements, much like Easy Company itself. They were on their way to be committed to the front lines when they ran into Winters and his men. The truth was slightly more complex than the series showed. What was true, however, was that a small unit of SS troops had been blended in with the 369th. This was a common late-war tactic used by the Germans, inserting fanatical SS cadres into regular army units to bolster their morale and ensure they fought to the last man. So while not all of the 300 men were SS, the elite, hard-nosed presence was indeed there, making the threat no less deadly. The on-screen battle, while intense, simplifies the immediate aftermath of that first shot. In reality, after shooting the sentry, Winters didn't pause. He immediately pivoted to his right and fired two full 8-round clips from his M1 Garand directly into the still surprised mass of German troops. He then ducked back behind the dike, reloaded, and continued to pop up and fire as the rest of his platoon finally arrived to join the fray. The result was a stunning tactical victory. Winters' group of 35 men completely routed two German companies totaling around 300 soldiers. The Germans, caught in a state of confusion and panic, broke and fled toward the river, many being cut down as they ran. It was a textbook example of how speed, surprise, and audacious leadership can overcome overwhelming odds. Interestingly, the filmmakers of Band of Brothers seem to be aware of the omitted grenade story. In a quiet scene after the battle, as Lewis Nixon consoles a shaken Winters, Winters is seen holding a grenade. He is idly unwrapping and fiddling with the piece of tape on the handle. It's a subtle, brilliant nod for those who know the real story, a silent acknowledgement of the duel that was too complex to fit into the show's narrative. Perhaps the most surprising fact about the Crossroads battle is its significance in Dick Winters' personal combat history. This brutal, chaotic, and ultimately triumphant engagement, where he personally led the charge and fired relentlessly into the enemy, marked the very last time he would fire his weapon in combat during World War II. Just a few days later, on October 9, 1944, his superiors recognized his extraordinary leadership and tactical genius. Colonel Sink promoted him to Executive Officer, XO, of the 2nd Battalion. This promotion was a logical step up the command ladder, placing him in a position of greater strategic responsibility. However, it also effectively removed him from the front lines and from direct command of his beloved Easy Company. Therein lies the great irony of his career. The very battle that cemented his legacy as one of the finest frontline combat leaders of the war was the event that ensured he would never lead a charge again. The military system, in its wisdom, promoted its best warrior off the battlefield, replacing his rifle with maps and radios for the remainder of the war. The psychological toll of the war, and specifically of the Crossroads battle, had a profound and lasting impact on Winters. As depicted in the series, he was haunted by the faces of the men he killed, but the reality of this trauma manifested in unexpected ways after he returned to civilian life. He had entered the army a sensitive young man, and returned, in his own words, an embittered man determined to sever ties with his past. A poignant anecdote illustrates this change perfectly. His father, hoping to help him readjust, encouraged him to accept an invitation to go deer hunting. Winters went, but the experience was agonizing. While waiting in the woods, a group of deer appeared just 20 feet from him. It was a perfect shot. "But I couldn't shoot," Winters recalled. "I couldn't even think about lifting that rifle. I was done. I did not want any more killing." That moment in the peaceful mountains of Pennsylvania revealed the deep scars of Holland. The man who had flawlessly executed a charge against 300 enemy soldiers could no longer bring himself to take a life, even that of an animal. He had done his job in the war, but the cost was a part of his soul. The hero had been successful, but the man was forever done with killing. For more than 50 years, long after the sounds of battle had faded, Dick Winters remained haunted by one unresolved question. Why did the young German soldier smile? It was this small human detail, more than any tactical memory, that became the central enigma of his war experience. He would turn the possibilities over in his mind for decades, searching for an answer he would never find. Was the soldier smiling in relief that both of their grenades had failed to explode? Was it a wry, knowing smile, acknowledging that Winters had won their deadly little game? Could he have been smiling because he sensed a moment's hesitation in Winters, a fleeting hope that he might be spared? Or was it something more sinister, a final, ironic taunt, knowing that the lone American soldier in front of him was about to realize he was about to be engulfed by 300 of his comrades? Here at Mythology Sin Fronteras, we may never know the answer. The young German soldier took that secret to his grave. But the persistence of this question in Winters' mind is the true legacy of the Crossroads. It proves that the myths of war are often built around tactical victories and heroic charges, but the reality for those who lived it is found in the small, intimate, and perpetually mysterious human moments that can never be fully explained.